In America today, there's a strange number quietly sitting inside millions of households. Not rent, not groceries, not student loans. $700. That's the average monthly car payment in the United States right now. And for a lot of people, it doesn't feel shocking anymore. It feels normal. You see it everywhere. A new SUV in the driveway. A shiny truck at the stoplight. Another $60,000 vehicle in a parking lot filled with people who would probably describe themselves as middle class. But behind that normal-looking payment is something much bigger. Because the $700 car payment isn't just a financial decision. It's a psychological trap. One that quietly reshapes how people spend, save, work, and even how they see themselves. And the strangest part, most people never realize it's happening. The new normal that wasn't normal before. 30 years ago, a $700 car payment would have sounded absurd to most Americans. Back in the early 1990s, the average monthly car payment was closer to $300. Even adjusting for inflation, that would be roughly $600 today. But now, $700 isn't the high end anymore. For many trucks and SUVs, payments of $800, $900, even $1,100 are becoming common. And yet people are still buying them. Not because Americans suddenly became dramatically wealthier, but because something subtle happened to how we perceive affordability. Car companies stopped selling cars. They started selling monthly payments. Instead of asking, can I afford a $55,000 vehicle? The question quietly became, can I handle $720 a month? It feels smaller, more manageable. Psychologists call this payment framing. When a big price is broken into smaller monthly pieces, the brain stops thinking about the total cost and focuses on the monthly discomfort. And that shift changes everything, because $55,000 feels like a life decision. But $720, that feels like just another bill, another subscription, another thing to add to the stack. Phone bill, streaming services, internet, insurance, and now, a car subscription that lasts 72 months, sometimes 84 months, 7 years. And once that becomes normal, something dangerous starts happening to the middle class. Because the problem with a $700 car payment isn't just the car. It's what that payment replaces, what it quietly pushes out of people's financial lives. Savings, investing, flexibility, freedom. But to understand why this single payment has become so powerful, we need to look at the moment people actually sign the deal. Because the trap doesn't start on the road. It starts inside the dealership. The dealership psychology. Inside a dealership, something subtle but powerful happens. You don't walk in thinking about a $700 payment. You walk in thinking about a car. Maybe your old one is breaking down. Maybe you just got a new job. Maybe you want something safer, bigger, nicer. Completely reasonable. But the moment the conversation starts, the focus quietly shifts. Not to the price, to the monthly payment. Instead of hearing, this vehicle costs $54,800, you hear, we can get you into this for around $710 a month. And that number is incredibly intentional, because human brains are much better at reacting to short-term numbers than long-term totals. It's the same reason people buy things with, for easy payments. Or why gyms advertise $29 per month, instead of $348 per year. Your brain compares that $710 to your monthly income, not the lifetime cost. And suddenly it feels doable. But here's the part most people don't calculate. A $700 payment over 72 months is more than $50,000. And that's before insurance, fuel, maintenance, and registration. When everything is included, that $700 car can easily cost $1,000 to $1,200 per month to own. But psychologically, the damage is already done. Because once someone mentally commits to a monthly payment, the rest of the numbers become flexible. A slightly longer loan, a slightly higher interest rate, a slightly more expensive model. Each change feels small, but together, they quietly push the payment higher and higher. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Dealerships don't need to convince you to buy the car. They just need to convince you the payment feels acceptable. Once that happens, the decision is already made. But the real impact of that decision doesn't show up on the day you drive the car home. It shows up slowly, month after month. Because the middle class isn't being crushed by one massive financial mistake. It's being squeezed by dozens of manageable payments. And the $700 car payment is often the biggest one of them all. Which leads to a question that almost nobody asks before signing. What does that $700 actually cost your future? Because the real price of the car isn't just the money you spend. It's the money that never gets the chance to grow. And that's where this problem becomes much much bigger than a car. The opportunity cost nobody sees. A $700 car payment doesn't feel like a life-changing decision. It feels like a lifestyle decision. A nicer commute, more comfort, better technology, maybe a little status. And on the surface, that seems harmless. But the real cost of the payment isn't just the $700 leaving your bank account. It's what economists call opportunity cost. The money you could have used somewhere else. Imagine something simple. Instead of sending $700 every month to a car loan for 6 years, you invested that money in something like a broad stock market index fund. Historically, the U.S. stock market has averaged roughly 7 to 10% annual returns over long periods. Now imagine you invested that $700 per month for those same 6 years. You wouldn't just have the money you put in. You'd have compounding growth. Roughly speaking, that could grow into around $60,000 or more, depending on the market. But the real difference shows up over time. Because people rarely stop at one car payment cycle. When the loan ends, something interesting happens psychologically. Most people don't celebrate being free from the payment. They upgrade, trade in a car, roll over the loan, start another 72-month cycle. Suddenly, that $700 payment doesn't last 6 years. It lasts 20 years, sometimes 30. And when you stretch that same $700 investment over decades, the numbers start looking very different. That money could grow into hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially even $1 million depending on time and returns. Which means the true cost of the car might not be $50,000. It might be $500,000 in future wealth. And here's the difficult part of human psychology. We're incredibly good at feeling the comfort of the present, but incredibly bad at visualizing the power of the future. A new car today is real. Future financial freedom feels abstract, distant, almost imaginary. So the brain chooses the thing it can feel right now. Comfort, status, convenience, even if the trade-off is something much bigger later. And that's why the $700 car payment has become such a quiet force in the American middle class. Because it doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like normal life. But the long-term effects are starting to show up in ways that most people don't immediately connect to their car. Delayed retirement, minimal savings, constant financial pressure even with decent incomes. And once you see the pattern, it raises an uncomfortable question. If so many people are struggling financially, why do so many of them still drive $50,000 cars? Because the answer isn't just economics. It's something deeper. It's identity. And the modern economy has become extremely good at selling people the feeling of who they want to be, even if it quietly drains their financial future in the process. The identity trap. A car used to be a tool, something that got you from point A to point B. But over the last few decades, it quietly became something else. A signal, a way of communicating who you are, without saying a word. The car you drive can suggest success, reliability, adventure, independence, status. And modern marketing understands this perfectly. Car commercials rarely talk about transportation. They talk about identity, freedom on an open road, a rugged truck climbing a mountain, a luxury SUV pulling into a beautiful suburban home. The message is subtle but powerful. This isn't just a car. This is the version of yourself you want to be. And when identity enters the equation, the price becomes much easier to justify. Because people rarely overspend on objects. They overspend on stories about themselves. The responsible parent who drives the safest SUV. The successful professional with the sleek sedan. The adventurous person with the off-road truck. Each story feels emotionally meaningful. But there's another layer to this. The middle class today lives in a world of constant comparison. Social media, neighborhoods, parking lots at work. Everywhere you go, you see signals of other people's lifestyles. And when everyone around you seems to be driving something new and expensive, it quietly resets what feels normal. Psychologists call this social proof. If everyone else is doing it, your brain assumes it must be reasonable. Even if the math doesn't make sense. Even if those same people are privately stressed about money. Even if many of them are financing their lifestyle with debt. And this creates a strange cycle. The middle class isn't trying to look rich. They're trying to look normal. But the definition of normal keeps getting more expensive. Which is how a $700 car payment slowly became part of everyday life. Not because everyone consciously chose it, but because the system around them made it feel like the expected choice. And once enough people accept that expectation, it becomes incredibly hard to step outside of it. But there is another way to look at the situation. A completely different mindset that a small number of people quietly adopt. One that flips the entire equation. Instead of asking, what car can I afford each month? They ask a very different question. One that changes their financial future in ways most people never consider. And it starts with a simple idea. A car should buy you mobility, not quietly take away your freedom. The quiet rebellion. There's nothing inherently wrong with buying a nice car. Comfort matters. Safety matters. Enjoying what you drive matters. But the problem begins when the payment becomes a permanent part of your life. When every 6 or 7 years, the cycle quietly restarts. Another loan. Another long-term payment. Another chunk of your future income already spoken for. The people who escape this pattern usually do something surprisingly simple. They stop thinking about the car as a monthly payment, and start thinking about it as a total life decision. Instead of asking, can I afford $700 a month? They ask, what could this $700 become if I kept it? And sometimes the answer changes their behavior completely. Maybe they buy a car that's a few years old. Maybe they keep their current car longer. Maybe they drive something slightly less impressive today so their future becomes dramatically more powerful. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look impressive in a parking lot. But over time, it creates something much more valuable than a new vehicle. Financial breathing room. The ability to save, to invest, to take risks, to change jobs, to build wealth quietly while everyone else is locked into payments. And that's the strange truth about the $700 car payment. It isn't destroying the middle class overnight. It's just quietly taking one small piece of their future every month. A piece that most people don't notice until years later. But once you see the pattern, you start to realize something important. Freedom isn't always about making more money. Sometimes it's simply about keeping more of the money you already earn. And that's a perspective that can completely change how someone thinks about their next financial decision. If this video made you think differently about money, habits, or the hidden psychology behind everyday decisions, consider subscribing for more videos that break down the systems shaping modern life. Because sometimes the most powerful changes start with seeing what everyone else has accepted as normal.